Crackdown 3 launched on the 15th of February 2019 and had one of the worst launches from Microsoft since the original Xbox One launched in 2013. Though, let's rewind back to 2014, when Crackdown 3 was first revealed to the world, to have a fully destructible city. The entire city could be destroyed by the players, and they'd be using the power of the cloud to simulate all of this destruction happening on screen. This would be done by CloudGen. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I think the company's called CloudGen. So they'd be tackling the engine and cloud areas. This was a new company set up by the founder of Regent Games. He'd set up this company called CloudGen that would be handling all the destruction and cloud elements of Crackdown 3. But it wouldn't just be CloudGen working on the game. The gameplay would be being done by Regent Games. The person who founded Regent Games is also the person who founded CloudGen. Sumo Digital would be making the campaign, and the original Crackdown 2 developers, Ruffian Games, would actually be going on to develop the multiplayer for the game. Yeah, I'll be honest, there is 4 developers for one game. I remember when this got revealed, I wasn't exactly optimistic. Why would there be 4 developers for one game? But let's take a step back and think. You know, this is going to be an entire city that you can destroy in any way you want. You just throw cars at it, rockets, whatever you want to fully destroy, topple skyscrapers. I can understand why there's 4 developers, but so that's not really a worry. Now, let's fast forward to 2015 Gamescom. At Gamescom, Microsoft showed the very first gameplay and trailers for the game, showing off the cloud computing in action.
Crackdown 3 will blow up the way you play games today by introducing a revolutionary new multiplayer experience using 100% destructible environments. By connecting to the Microsoft Cloud, play with 20 times the computational power of your Xbox One and experience unrelenting destruction and mayhem.
This was showing a world that was fully destructible, something that would amaze fans of the series and critics alike. Though it was announced at 2015 Gamescom that multiplayer would be the only area of the game where the city had full destruction, meaning you could only destroy the entire city and topple skyscrapers only in the multiplayer, not the campaign. This was due to requiring 24/7 cloud computing, and I'd say it's a fair trade-off. Obviously they can't, not every player can have their own cloud server to process all the destruction. I'd say it's a fair trade-off. Limited destruction would still be available in a single player, likely destroying walls and maybe smaller buildings, but not toppling a whole skyscraper. I'd say it's a fine trade-off. Not being able to topple over a skyscraper is, it's sad, but again, it's what it is. At least you get experience in multiplayer, you just won't experience it in single player. Now, let's just hope that Crackdown 3 doesn't see any major shakeups or changing developers. Well, in January of 2018, CloudGen, the team, if you remember, were creating the cloud engine for the game, has actually been acquired by Epic Games, and many from the team at Regent Games, the team making the gameplay, also left to join Epic Games. So yeah, Epic Games basically took CloudGen and Regent Games from Crackdown 3. Not a good look for the team at Crackdown. They've just lost 2 of the major 4 developers. But in June of that year at E3, Matt Booty, head of Xbox's games division, games developers and Microsoft Studios, would actually confirm that Sumo Digital, the team who were creating the campaign, would now be the principal developer on the project from now on. It's also likely at this time that Ruffian Games, who likely have left the project at this time, because when Crackdown 3 actually launched, Ruffian Games were nowhere to be seen on the project. Likely meaning also when CloudGen and Regent Games left the project, Ruffian were likely kicked off the project too. Here's also a fun fact: the team at Ruffian Games, who made the original Crackdown 2, have actually been acquired by Rockstar. In 2020 they were acquired by Rockstar and officially became Rockstar Dundee, if you're wondering why they never made another game like Crackdown 4. Crackdown 3 would see many delays, originally planning a 2016 launch, but we know that never happened. and it was delayed many times, and it didn't launch until February of 2019. And oh, that was a day to be remembered for not good reasons. Crackdown 3 launched abysmally, with on Metacritic, the game was saying a 60 for critics and a 4.2 from users. But why? Why was Crackdown 3 such a critical mess? Well, first, obviously in the pre-launch stuff, we've kind of gone into the history of the game's reveal, and you gotta think, when in 2015 you saw those buildings being toppled over and all that massive destruction, in 2019 we got a game that had an absolute minimal amount of destruction, like walls could be destroyed and that was about it. Honestly, it could be a different game. Crackdown 3 in 2015 and Crackdown 3 in 2019 are almost completely different games. The story in Crackdown was never ever a highlight, but it was serviceable and interesting at times. For example, Crackdown 2 actually kind of two stories running at the time. The Freaks, kind of like a zombie mutated creature, and there was like the main story which was defeating the Freaks, but there's actually a really cool side story that not a lot of people know of. A cool side story where in the audio logs, you'd actually find out that the agency, the people who you play as in Crackdown, actually were going to make a vaccine for it and save people, but they were going to wall it into only their city, their section of the city. And basically make people join the agency to get the vaccine and save lives, which is actually a really cool story, but it was only through audio logs and very few people actually know that. Crackdown 3's story though is honestly forgettable, and genuinely at times I feel like the game doesn't even have a story. But I will actually tell you another fun fact, which we had a couple in this video. The lead writer of Crackdown 3, the person who wrote the story, is Joseph Staten. If you know who that is, that might ring a bell, and you're like, I know that name, and because it's Joseph Staten is the lead writer and designer of the original Halo series, and he's the current lead on Halo Infinite. I honestly found this out while researching for this video, and wow, I was blown away. I had no clue Joseph Staten was the lead writer of Crackdown 3. The multiplayer for Crackdown 3 was, well, it just wasn't great. It does feature a honestly insane level of destruction. There's buildings to knock over and platforms to destroy, but again, still absolutely nothing compared to the original reveal. And it just wasn't very fun because it used the same auto-aim mechanic from the campaign, where if you hold LT, it just auto-locks onto an enemy and you just hold RT to kill them. And that kind of made combat in the multiplayer more of who has the fastest fire rate gun and less about aiming. I think the main problem with Crackdown 3 was, it's a game out of time. Let me explain. The game just feels like it should have released 5 years earlier than it did. Crackdown 3 lacks innovation. The main campaign has very, very few innovations. Let's compare Crackdown 3's new features to Crackdown 2, for example. Crackdown 2 introduced the wingsuit, the zombies, love or hate them, UV weapons, armor color customizations, jet boots, and a PvP multiplayer. Crackdown 3 added Terry Crews, I guess. It really added very little to the overall Crackdown series, and I think that's the main reason the game didn't do so well, is it just didn't innovate at all by adding absolutely nothing really. There is some small things they added, but major new features were too far and few between. Updates for the game did come. Crackdown 3 had multiple post-launch updates which added major new features like the wingsuit returned from Crackdown 2, free cosmetics and free new weapons, and they added the return of the sandbox mode, which was called Keys to the City, which was in Crackdown 1 and 2. You know, that's decent enough, and if you were sticking around with Crackdown 3, you know, it kept you entertained for a little bit. Ultimately though, it did very little to solve the major issues of Crackdown 3. And unfortunately, I don't think any update could ever have saved this game, unless they completely redid half the game. Finally, I want to tackle the idea of, will there ever be a Crackdown 4? In a 2021, in an alternative timeline, where Microsoft didn't acquire tons of studios like Bethesda, I would say yes, Crackdown 4 is gonna happen. But not unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, if you're not a Crackdown fan, this is a good thing, but if you are a Crackdown fan, it's kind of a bad thing. I think in our timeline, in 2021, when Microsoft owns 20 plus studios, and we have games like Starfield, The Elder Scrolls 6, Contraband, Redfall, The Outer Worlds 2, and many, many more games coming from Microsoft, I really don't see a future for Crackdown. Every studio who's made Crackdown is either shut down or been acquired, or they're not part of the Xbox Game Studios, and I really don't think there's a future for the series. I really loved the first two games. Crackdown 1 and 2 are some of my favorite games. I really wish we would see a Crackdown 4, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see the game for a while. I think there's a chance maybe for a remaster or a remake in the future, but I think it's going to be a very long time away because I think Crackdown 3, unfortunately, nailed the coffin shut.